Hello, and welcome back to the FEZ show. I'm your host, Giordmaina, and we have so much to talk about today from a really exciting Mexican E-Prix. Joining me to discuss and break down every little bit of that Mexican E-Prix is Edward Hunter and Joshua Burch. Evening, boys. How are we?
Oh, I'll go first then. I'm good, thanks, Jack. Nice to finally get the season undergoing for me because I didn't watch the first rounds. So excellent to see a really close race in Mexico and some big developments, as I'm sure we'll get into.
Yes, good evening, Jack. Good evening, Ed, and good evening, everybody else as well. Doing really, really well. I mean, we're recording this on Valentine's Day, so as you can assume, I'm sick to death of going on social media. So let's talk about some car racing that I thought was absolutely fantastic and really put together our true love of motorsport.
It's all right. We love everyone here. Everyone, we love you all, boys. Right? Valentine's Day, and we're recording a podcast. But as is life.
At
Right,
least we're
but
together, eh, Jack?
exactly. At least we're together, right? Is that? I don't know. It's getting sad now very quickly. But anyway, let's move on and talk about Porsche because, wow. Right, I don't think, Josh, anyone was expecting Porsche to do what they did in Mexico. Yes, they were good last year in Mexico, but obviously that was at a different track in Puebla. So when we saw obviously practice and Porsche at the front, but practice we don't always, you know, it's never always too relevant practice. But then they did it in qualifying and then they did it in the race. But what I want to talk about, because obviously they got secured the 1-2, but let's talk about their strategy because I want to talk about the start of the race. When they took that early attack mode, I think it was lap 2, lap 3, pretty much as soon as the attack mode was activated, they were into that attack mode activation zone. And it didn't seem to quite work for them. So it was amazing to see how their race sort of panned out from there. But talk to me about that early attack mode. What did you think when you saw it, when they took that attack mode?
I said in the commentary as well with Ed, it was very, very risky as well because it was an early call. I mean, the top 8 used both their attack modes in the first 15 minutes of the race. Very, very risky. There could have been a late safety car, could have been an opportunity to gain some positions up later on as well. Porsche seemed to have their strategy nailed down since the lights went out as well. He got a great start. Wehrlein, he controlled it. Mortara slipped back ever so slightly. And then Lotterer came back up. But then as soon as he took the attack mode as well, Mortara overtook him. Wehrlein seemed like he was saving the energy, and they kept switching over on the sixth lap of the race. So very interesting, very bizarre strategy calls as well. It took us a while to understand what they were doing. They were very much playing the long game throughout that race. But Wehrlein, I think he went into that race knowing that he would be the overall winner. It seemed like the engineers behind the scenes just had the brains switched on about how long the race was going to last. Both, I think, Porsche and Vern at DSG were definitely thinking ahead.
Yeah, Ed, in terms of, obviously they took the early attack mode, and obviously they stayed at the front, but then when the others took their attack mode, like the Jean-Eric Verns and the Antonio Felix da Costas, they were overtaken, right? Because of that early attack mode, they didn't really get the advantage that they wanted. The others overtook them. And then that was that lull period there that Josh was sort of alluding to with them potentially at that point saving energy. Did you expect that to be Porsche's strategy, or did you think, they've just smashed it in qualifying, great race pace, but here we go again, a bit like Lotterer and Diria in the first race? They didn't quite have maybe the tyre management or just some inherent race pace which sort of just faded away.
Yeah, well, they were very quick all weekend, and in fact, we can maybe even talk about qualifying at some point because I think there was a lot of people thinking Lotter after he was fastest in FP1, second in FP2, that he was going to qualify on pole, but in the end, Wehrlein stepped up and got pole position with Lotterer starting third, and it's sort of quite quickly. Once they were able to clear Mortara, there was sort of a Porsche 1-2, and Lotterer acted very strongly as a sort of rear gunner. So the Mortara and the Acechitas had to negotiate Lotterer before they could get past Wehrlein when they were offset on attack mode. So was I surprised? I was very surprised when Wehrlein was leading and suddenly started slowing down on the main straight because I thought he might actually have a mechanical problem. But no, it was actually just Porsche managing energy to perfection. And it seemed like a very confident strategy. So I mean, we know there's been a few changes behind the scenes at Porsche. A new CEO whose name I keep forgetting because I've committed the old CEO's name to memory. So I think it's Florian somebody out of Florian Thomas, if I remember correctly, who's the new CEO. That was the name they said on the podium. I might have misremembered it wrong, but pretty sure that's going to put a massive smile on their face, that result, because Porsche 1-2, not something we've seen in Formula E before, not something we've seen in motorsport for quite a while, actually. I believe in open wheel, Dan Gurney in French Grand Prix at Solitude 1962 was the last win for Porsche in open wheelers, but they won more recently in, Le Mans. It's the same Le Mans team in that Porsche squad that won in 2017, 2018 in World Endurance Championship. So certainly great news for them, and great news for Wehrlein too. I thought Wehrlein drove a really, really confident race, and Lotterer much more mature than we saw last season, where we saw a couple of let's say he dived up the inside where he thought there was space and there wasn't space, and this time he was extremely well behaved. He was quite well behaved in Diri as well, from what I heard anecdotally. So yeah, very impressive by Porsche, and a brilliant strategy that they managed to perfection.
It was quite funny though, Josh, when the energies came up with about 20 minutes to go, and we saw that Porsche had that 2% energy. It was kind of like, go, 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 go now. Like, it was like, now attack, right? Everybody knows now that we have more energy than you, so let's plan into action. So obviously, they've thought about it. They've calculated it well. And then that boom up the field to win the race. Was that potentially or arguably one of the best strategic races in Formula E history?
I think you've got the money right where your mouth is there, Jaguars. I think that was fantastic strategy calls or from Porsche as well. You did say, yeah, the energy came out with, what was it, about 26 minutes to go, just after they'd finished their second attack mode. And we saw, was it 38 they had? Everyone else was flicking around 36, 35. Sam Bird had used the most. He was down, I think, at 34% of energy as well. So it definitely looked like Porsches were saving the energy. They were very much controlling at the front at this time as well. Mortara only led from lap 7 to 26. Wehrlein took over lap 27 to 40 as well in the last 20 minutes of that race as well. So they both led 20 laps each in the race, so half and half, which is surprising because we should also be talking about the fact, Mortara done another strong championship challenge. He led half that race. No, we're talking about Porsche's domination. And in reality, it was only a 50-50. It's strange the way it works out, but that is motorsport, and that is the beauty of the strategy calls. As I said earlier on, the engineers got it bang on. Porsche could have slowed up, gave it just to make sure that they themselves finished the race, because it was, what was it, 0.1 Wehrlein crossed the line with in the end, but they chose to go for that extra lap. Mystery why they did, but I'm sure we'll explain it throughout the podcast as well. But yeah, definitely one of the greatest races for team strategies, and it's a worrying pattern we're seeing in season 8 so far, with the first 3 races, with race 1 Mercedes, Van Dorn helping De Vries, race 2 De Grassi helping Mortara, and race 3 Lotterer helping Wehrlein. Can't wait to see what happens when we get to Berlin and London, when I think the Neos will be fighting at the front if the rate this goes.
Yeah, but what you alluded to there actually is what I want to talk about with Ed in terms of when the Porsches crossed the line, because we're talking about, couldn't they have slowed down? Why would they make the race one lap longer? And it caught quite a lot of people out, and I suppose it would, because it literally came down to that 1 second. So you would have had to have managed that, 20 minutes, 15 minutes before the race, before that moment, to sort of realise, they might cross the line with 1 minute to go, with 1 second to go, sorry. Ed, the question is, well, why didn't they just slow down, make it 1 lap? But with Lotterer and Wehrlein being so close together, and I know we talk potentially team orders, right? That they may have been told to hold station, but Lotterer's right there. If Wehrlein lifts off going on at the exit of the Parabolica, right? Lotterer's surely going to pass him, right, and take the lead of the race, surely, right? If he's slowing down, he's just going to go right past. He's not going to slow down and wait behind him, and that didn't happen. Like, Wehrlein didn't slow down. That's why they crossed that line. I do think if there was like a 2-second gap, 2.5, 3-second gap between the two cars, I think Wehrlein would have eased up and made it that 1 lap. Do you have the same sort of idea, or do you think there was team strategy in play?
I think there was. I believe what both drivers said after the race, which was Wehrlein especially. He sort of said that the team was telling me to speed up to make sure that we got 40 laps in instead of 39, which is certainly interesting. I can think of a few reasons why they did it. Certainly in terms of Porsche's an EV brand, it certainly shows that they're efficient, and it's sort of, maybe not necessarily the best advert for Formula E, the two Porsches streaking away to the tune of 9 seconds while everyone else is fighting with each other and running out of energy. But it's Porsche could do it because they were in that position, because Mortara had spent the race fighting with Robin Freins. An excellent fight, by the way, which I really enjoyed. But Freins ended up deciding to go aggressive on energy, which backfired at the end. He fell down to 7th. But that sort of created this opportunity for Lotterer and Wehrlein to pull away to the extent that they did. Would they have decided to go for 39 laps if Lotterer was a bit further back? I sort of felt like you say that Lotterer had been, because he was sort of saving energy in the slipstream of Wehrlein, I felt he had a few opportunities that he didn't take. And I thought it was very interesting, as my face goes completely dark. Hey, I'm back. But I thought it was very interesting that Lotterer didn't go for it, because he's had his own several near misses, much like Wehrlein has. I think the Lotterer of old, we probably would have expected to go for that. If you think back to Santiago in the 4th season, his first podium in Formula E, when he was fighting with Jean-Eric Vergne for the lead in the other Techeetah and nearly T-boned him in the back and sent him into the barriers, and they just avoided calamity. There was none of that on Saturday. So you have to say Lotterer, a very mature drive, and you got to think if the Porsche pace keeps up, then his time's going to come soon. But in this occasion, Pascal out-qualified him, and that was what ended up being decisive. So Porsche, as I said, it was a risky strategy. Could have backfired. They could have both ran out of energy if they'd not managed it by backing off earlier in the race. And it was very dramatic the way they were backing off. We saw Vergne doing exactly the same thing to Costa as well. And it ended up being the right call, the way things played out.
Yeah, Josh, we saw quite a few aggressive strategy calls, and even with Envision there, which Ed sort of pointed out with Robin Freins. Decided to go on that charge and was told to go on that charge to get into 3rd and deal with it later, right? So they were hoping for that 39th lap, effectively, that the race would have ended there. And that's, I think, what they were banking on. And you'd like, right, get to 3rd and then you deal with the rest, right? You defend. And it was very similar with teammate as well, Nick Cassidy, who we assumed couldn't take attack mode, but then did take attack mode towards the end to try and boost his way up the field quite quickly, which also sort of backfired for him with energy towards the end of the race. But what was really interesting in that race was the range of strategic options that we saw.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even me and Ed said in commentary, we were confused about if Cassidy had taken his second attack mode. We couldn't remember because it was getting later and later into the race. And all of a sudden, we saw him dart off in the Forestall and activate it, and thought, well, that's a bit unwise with the energy reduction that he would have had to take. He would have been on significantly less than everybody else ahead of him into the last couple of laps. So very strange call. I was a bit worried during the race as well. Didn't say this on the commentary, but I was very worried in the back of my head where the Envisions, the way they were racing, hard, aggressive, they seemed to not care at all about the energy recovery. I thought, is this another Nissan? Like what happened to them a couple of years ago when Buemi and Roland at the time just ran out, because they were going flat out, overtaking, barging past the Mercedes as well, Degrassi getting involved, Cassidy locking up into turn 1 and almost taking Mortara out with him as well. It was very much, as you say, get to the front and who cares what happens next? We'll deal with it later. It was the sense that they'd taken a page out of Barney's book from How I Met Your Mother. That's future Nick and that's future Cassidy's problem as well. Just over there. I'm not going to deal with it. We'll just continue racing for the time being. It was fantastic, but a bit ad hoc, in my opinion.
Yeah, indeed. Right, Ed, let's talk qualifying, because I think we get into grips now with this qualifying system, and it's starting to look like it's working in a sense, and I still think we are getting the surprises, right? In terms of, the Mercedes, for example, who blitzed Diriyah, and obviously they blitzed Diriyah as well last season, but struggled in Mexico, just about made the jewels, right, by the skin of their teeth. And then you got the likes of Lucas Degrassi, where we're seeing Mortara, right, absolutely being dominant this season. We thought Degrassi, and Degrassi I still think it's only one race, right? We're not going to write off Degrassi right now. I think Degrassi's got a big part to play in this championship, Ed. But when he misses out on the dual system, I think that's the shock, right? Because we're expecting Venturi to be up there. We're expecting Mercedes to be up there. Maybe even Porsche now. And, to see them miss out it's still creating that shock, which I still think is quite good. Just your thoughts on the qualifying system in terms of how it's doing, how it's potentially creating this more of these front protagonists in the championship. So when we get down to the end, we will know clearly who's in the title fight going down into South Korea.
Yeah, it's my first time watching it, so I don't have any other kind of frame of reference. Like I know Pico saw it in testing, you guys all saw the first races. For me, it was the first time, so I really enjoyed it. On the whole, I think the duels worked really, really well. Obviously, like you say, Mercedes just about sneaking in by the skin of their teeth. It was really one where they'd struggled in practice and setting up their car, and because of the shorter practice time this season, they didn't have as much time to sort of filter out the issues and get the sort of perfect setup. Venturi a little bit quicker on the mark in terms of setup with Mortara's car, but Degrassi didn't quite get qualifying right and ended up in a battle. In fact, he ended up spinning Van Dorn around and getting himself a penalty, which could well prove costly come the final reckoning. So a little bit of a clumsy race from Degrassi, unfortunately, and unlucky for Van Dorn as well. I think Van Dorn could probably got a few more points than he did in the end, and it was only really Nick de Vries of all the strugglers that actually recovered anything from the race. As for the duels themselves, they were really always great to see the two DS cheaters. That one was an incredibly close semi-final between those two, with Verne just about pipping Da Costa, and that ended up being, again, much like the Porsches, ended up being decisive in the final result because the two DS cheaters ended up working over Da Costa. At one point, lost the wheel fairing when I think Wehrlein went for attack mode in the Ferrisol Stadium, and the wheel cover fell loose and just about fell off a bit after the first corner in the sort of turn 3 and 4 section. Thankfully, not hitting anyone and just lying out in the way. But that was a bit of a scary moment for Da Costa, and sort of, again, caused by sort of him qualifying behind. And then the final duel, of course, with Mortara and Wehrlein, with Mortara just about having the edge. Wehrlein had a slight scruffy start, and then right at the end, there was that big spin for Mortara, which was very dramatic. There's like CCTV footage of Mortara doing his little Tokyo drift routine where he'd gone wide into the Peraltada. He tried to save it like 3 or 4 times, and the final time was just a bit too much rotation for him to save. So Wehrlein ended up sneaking through, and Wehrlein still set an amazing time at the end. I think it was really low, 107.1, which was really insane. So yeah, incredible. The duels worked incredibly well. The group sort of format worked fairly well in terms of there was that tension whether Mercedes were going to make it or not. There was Nick Cassidy who tried to do something a bit different, going earlier before everyone else didn't quite work out in his group. And the only a complaint I have a little bit about this new qualifying format is in the group stages, they sort of, because it's so long, they change tyres. And I feel that's a little bit kind of antithetical. Maybe with Hankook coming in, they'll have a different tyre philosophy than Michelin. But the Michelin's, the whole point of it that I liked was the durability, the fact that they could keep going and give more or less roughly the same performance throughout the whole season, effectively. If you wanted to use them for a whole season, they were basically road tyres, they weren't wet and dry. And I didn't like the fact that because the tyre wear was a bit higher at Mexico, they let them change in between runs. And that felt to me a little bit like not something I liked. I mean, I can understand from the team's point of view why they do it, but to me, it didn't feel very formula-y, effectively.
I think that's part of the rules. I think they have to come in and change tyres. I think it's part of the rules for the new qualifying format that in the group stage they have to come in and change tyres. So what I wanted to ask Josh in terms of qualifying is that practice which Ed alluded to. How critical now that the practice session is, you've got, instead of an hour and 15 minutes that they used to have, they've now got just that solitary hour with 2 half-an-hour sessions. How crucial has practice become in terms of making sure that you are feeling comfortable with the track and the circuit? And we normally used to say, track evolution, practice doesn't mean much, but now practice might have more of an emphasis on qualifying because you have to get it right. And if you don't get it right, those people who are struggling in practice are probably the ones that are going to miss out on the duels come qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we saw as well, in practice for Mexico, because it was only a single weekend, there was cars out every second as well. There was always somebody trying either a string of 220 kilowatt lap times, or even a few of them, like the 2 Mercedes, they were practicing at the end of free practice 2, a load of 250 kilowatt lap times as well. Dario Franchitti said as well, I would rather be practicing at 220 rather than 250, because once you master the slower speed, going quick is not a problem. Interesting take, and it seemed to pay off for what we saw with the Mercedes struggling as well. But I think the practice times now have become finally what we need in Formula E. They're short, sweet, to the point. The 45-minute session for free practice one always felt like a bit of a slug to get out of bed. Little bit of a you're sort of wiping the sleep away from your eyes for the first 15 minutes as well. You sort of like just getting to grips. The cars are just trailing around the circuit for the first 20 minutes or so. Then the last 5, if we're lucky, we get a big lap time. Now it's all changed. Finally, you wake up and you feel like you're ready. You're pumped up. You're ready to go. And you're banging the car and out you go. You've got no time at all to look at the sights, do any setting changes or anything. You're out there and you're constantly going round and round and around. And it works. You get the data that you need as well. You get the system ready. The qualifying change, as you say, has helped as well, because now instead of having to do 2 laps in qualifying, you've got to do a maximum of 8. And that's if you get to the duels. You can do 4 laps in the group stages, and then you've got to do your duels, which is 2 more plus another 1 as well. So it's fantastic. We've finally got a system that works really, really well. The only problem I have with the qualifying format, as I said back in Dewey, and I said to Ed in the commentary as well in qualifying, it takes too long. We used to have a 45-minute qualifying. Now it's an hour and 15. That is so long that it needs to be shrunk down and just tidied up a bit. And I think now they've started to realize it, because I heard some of the teams were complaining that literally they were sitting around just waiting with nothing to do. Drivers hopped out the car in between the sessions when they were changing the tire because they just needed to talk with their engineer. We saw Lotterer do that. Very, very bizarre. Just tidied up a bit and we've got it perfect. And also, we didn't see any added time on in this race. I do wonder if that added time was put there, if we had a safety car, exactly how many of them would have got to the finish. And I must think as well, usually 45 minutes of practice, they go out there and learn the levels of the reduction as well. They can't do that anymore. They really can't. So it's a guessing game if that safety car comes out. It's brilliant, this new format.
Yeah, I must admit, there is a lot of positives, and I totally agree with you. I remember sitting there waiting, writing my qualifying report, and I was like, oh, we're still going. Like, the gaps between the duels, I think, is my issue. Like, the gaps between the quarterfinals or the next duel starting from the one finishing, it's just too long. Like, just get on with it. Because you're just sitting around all day, and then it's less time for those teams to prepare as well, because you're going into that 3-hour window between the end of qualifying and the race, when it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes. Between the front runners, like finishing up and then getting out again. So I just think it needs to be shortened. It doesn't need to be that long. I still think the groups are too long at 12 minutes, because we like that crescendo at the end. Oh, Mercedes going to get, but we're waiting. Like, you're just like, okay. You can have a cup of tea, make a sandwich in that time. And, the first couple of laps, they're just not important. They're just so not important until you get to the end. And you're just like, well, can we shorten the sessions down slightly so we get to that crescendo quicker? And then that might help as well. Because, the first 6-7 minutes of the group stage are particularly dull. I have to admit, until we get to the end.
Yeah, if I may interrupt, Jack, I feel like Q1 in Formula 1 is basically that for me. So yeah. I didn't really mind. But I can see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, because as I said, it's very similar to the F1 qualifying system. We like the F1 qualifying system, but they don't, there's only like 2 or 3 runs in that. And the tracks are longer, so it takes, when you go to Spa and so forth, by the time they do 1 lap, and, the time's up very quickly. Whereas the tracks are so short here that they've done like tons of laps, right, really quickly. But let's move on, because there's so much still to talk about. And I want to talk about Jaguar. And I'll come to you, Ed. What's going on? Because Jaguar, they were kind of like this last season, but then they came out and they were all right. They started slow. They didn't have a great pre-season testing. This season, they looked better than last season at the start, but in Mexico, they were just nowhere. Like, what were we thinking about Jaguar?
Well, not looking good, for certain, like you say. It was really just qualifying that went wrong for them. They couldn't get to the duels. Mitch Evans qualifying 11th in the end, Sam Bird 17th, and then Mitch Evans didn't have a great start, so they were sort of 14th and 15th after the first lap, and then it was the case of them having to battle their way through. The car, like you say, is good. It's actually got some good pace in it. It's just when they don't qualify so well and they have a bad first lap, it's a matter of having to fight their way through the field and having to use up more energy in the process. As we saw, it was interesting because I thought back to race 2 at Valencia in season 7 where Mitch Evans complained because Jake Dennis decided not to do the extra lap in the end, and Mitch Evans complained, "Oh, I've got so much energy left. Why did we back off there and lose positions?" And this time they went the other way. They've risked it to try and get Mitch Evans into the top 6. I think he was running 6th very briefly at one stage, and then of course he ended up having to basically not being able to finish without running out of energy, basically, and having to really save quite dramatically and drop down the order. And Sam Bird as well, and the two Envisions, as we said, were on a similar strategy. Interesting that Envision will be using Jaguar powertrains next season, so there's a little bit of maybe they're using the same data already, but yeah, I think it was a difficult day, and it was sort of exasperated by them taking a risk on energy to try and save face, get a few more points, and in the end it kind of backfired. But I think they'll be back because the car's still quick. It's still the same car fundamentally that got on the podium several times. Did they win a race in season 7? Sam Bird did win a race in season 7. Yeah, I think Mitch Evans got a few podiums, but never quite won a race in season 7. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaguar bounce back from this, but certainly their morale were taking a big hit after what was a pointless day and a really difficult opening couple of races for them.
And Josh, I want to talk about Nissan, because Nissan's sort of in the same boat as Jaguar. And, we talk about these driver lineups, and we don't know what's going on with Sebastian Buemi. It seems puzzling. The man who dominated Formula E at the beginnings just can't seem to do anything right. But then, nor can his teammate at the moment, Maximilian Gunther. And I know you might say that there's like a bedding in period potentially, but Maximilian Gunther at BMW was a star, right? And, he could pull qualifying laps out the bag. The Santiago win, going back a couple of seasons now, was brilliant from Gunther. Like, the talent was there. Everyone thought, man, this is the next superstar in Formula E, is Maximilian Gunther. And it's not quite worked out. And even at Nissan, he's just trundling along ahead of Buemi, but he's still, he's not really making an impact.
Yeah, I was very, very worried about Nissan this weekend as well. Maximilian Gunther, the bedding in period really should have been over by now. I mean, we are at race 3. I know Diriyah was a doubleheader, but still, you've had all of pre-season testing in that car as well. You've had 2 race weekends now, 3 races. It should have been a lot better than that. The same argument could be thrown the way of Sergio Sette Camera at Dragon. Not Sergio Sette Camera, Antonio Giovinazzi at Dragon, to confuse my drivers. But yeah, I didn't like what I saw this weekend. You say about Sebastian Buemi, we do not know what's going on with him. I noticed as well that he's one of only 3 drivers who does not appear in the big Formula E intro that they play at the start of every broadcast on the world feed. He's not in it. And as I said, back in Diriyah, I think Nissan are going to have a hard time keeping him focused on Formula E this year, with a very strong challenge in the World Endurance Championship he's got going on as well with Toyota. So I don't know. It's a head scratcher, literally, as to what is happening. We said in the race, me and Ed as well in the comms, that Buemi started 18th, Bird started in 17th, and to link the 2 Jaguar and Nissan points together, they sort of did link together throughout the race. Buemi got up to 9th place, Bird got up to 10th, and they were sort of tag teaming each other to sort of go for the overtakes. It was some very good racing, and I was very proud of what they were doing as well. I thought, yes, we've got Buemi sort of back into it as well. And Buemi did stay there. He did stay up in the top 10. I think he finished 7th in the end because of Degrassi's penalty for making a Mercedes sandwich. But Sam Bird, and as well, he dropped back a lot. He got caught up with energy crisis as well. He hit 0%. It was a bit of a mess at the end there for Jaguar. And I've got to admit, it's a difficult one to swallow, but Jaguar are on a long, painful path, I think, this year. That they're going to have to maybe not get back until at least Berlin. It's going to be a lot of work. They've got a month to find the issue, but I can't understand what the issue would be, considering it's the same generation of car in its last year. You would have thought this would have been a great season, especially, as Ed said, we had Mitch Evans last year, a championship contender, and Sam Bird won in Diriyah race 2. So very, very strange as to what's gone on at Jaguar, but Nissan, a roller coaster weekend.
So in terms of Nissan and Sebastian Buemi, I think we'll stay on this topic for 2 seconds, because I'm not going to question Sebastian Buemi's attitude or talent or so forth. Is this a case of Nissan for the last couple of seasons just haven't been quick enough to be at the front? Or is this because we're expecting Formula E to be so close, right? And we really should be expecting Nissan to be fighting the likes of Porsches at this point, the Tech Cheetahs, at this stage of the Generation 2 car, considering it's its last year, considering that it's just an evolution from last year's car in terms of just software, because the hardware is exactly the same. So is it just the Nissan is inherently slow and that's the problem, or is it more on the driver's side?
I definitely think it's the car, in my opinion, because they introduced a new car in the middle of season 7, and Roland got a couple of good qualifying performances out of it, but it never felt like they really got on top of that car and figured out how to get, especially in terms of efficiency. Although, interestingly, they were one of the teams that played it really conservatively in Mexico, and it kind of paid off for them. I was actually really impressed by Buemi's performance. Gunther, I thought, did really okay in qualifying, qualified 10th. For the race, and then ended up sort of dropping back as things played out. But Buemi climbed his way through the field. I think he started around about the same position as Bird, put a really great overtake on Bird, which I remember at the first corner. And it felt a little bit more like the Buemi of old that we got used to seeing in the first couple of seasons, who just won races constantly for Renault Edams. And he's not had quite the same luck with Nissan only winning once, I believe, in New York, and a couple of other podiums here and there, and most notably at Mexico last time in 2020, last time we were at Hermanos Rodriguez, of course. So I like I said, I agree with you. I don't question Buemi's skill. I think it's more a case of him just sort of having to fight against a car that Nissan haven't necessarily got the best out of. Is there more in it? I don't really know. I feel like Nissan are focused more on Gen 3 at the current moment. It's felt that way for a while, at least to me. I feel like one of the teams that is sort of all their focus is really on season 9 at the moment. And it'll be interesting to see if Nissan have any customer teams in season 9, because there are a couple of rumors going around. I think there was a rumor that Dragon might be looking at Nissan, but I wasn't sure if that was any credence to that one. But certainly Dragon are looking to become a customer team rather than making their own powertrain for Gen 3. So we'll see. Nissan are one of the manufacturers committed long term, so they've probably got to make it work somehow. And you'd certainly think Oliver Gregory Drew at Edams will be doing their best. And the new boss at Nissan, is it Volpe? Tommaso Volpe? Again, all these OEM CEOs. I'm going to have to memorize them next time we do a podcast. But yeah, I certainly think... I think it's a little bit too early to judge Gunther. I think he needs a good race result under his belt, and then maybe we can see if he's matching up to Buemi or not. But I certainly wouldn't write off. There's a little bit of life left in the old dog, Sebastian Buemi, so don't count him off just yet.
No, definitely not. I wouldn't. And it was interesting what you said there about Dragon in terms of potentially becoming a customer team, in terms of we kind of wanted that for them ages ago and hoping that they would pull in an American manufacturer, because obviously with Jay Penske and obviously Roger Penske as well, his dad with great links with Chevrolet and Ford, you would have thought that something could have happened, but it makes sense because they're not a car manufacturer, a bit like Envision Racing, and there's not a real massive need for them to make their own powertrain, so it will be interesting to see if they do turn their attentions to become a customer team. Before we wrap up, Josh, I think we'll just talk slightly on DS Tech Cheetah, because they also had a great race, right? Sort of, they've been in the mix of nowhere, sort of like since season 7. They've kind of just been in no man's land, near the front, not right the fastest, but they're there or thereabouts, the Red Bull of yesteryear, you could say, for Tech Cheetah. It was a good race, and they had some problems in that race as well with Vern's radio. Like, it was a really strong performance from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree. They are compared a lot to the Red Bull of yesteryear, aren't they? Hopefully, like Red Bull, they can have a big resurgence into this season as well. I think as well, this weekend, I think Mexico was their strongest in a long, long time. I know it didn't work out the way you think it would, but they got a podium with Jean-Eric Verne as well. But qualifying was a big thumbs up for them. We talked about it earlier on with their duel. It was one of Ed's highlights as well. 11 thousandths of a second separated Verne and Acosta. If I was a team principal, I would be breathing a sigh of relief that is the gap between my two drivers. That means they're both on pace. They're both exactly the same. They are both world champions. It's brilliant. They've got, I think, one of the strongest lineups for drivers on the grid. The race was a little bit weird. As you said, Vern had problems on the radio. We were hearing it as well because on the commentary me and Ed were doing as well, we had the pit lane channel up and we had Vern's radio selected. We heard just before we went on air and the lights went out as well. Vern was told over the radio, be careful with energy management today. This race is going to go longer than scheduled. Now, we thought that could mean, oh, he's going to have added time. They're thinking of a safety car. Didn't know what was going to happen at the end. So they were immediately saving energy all the way throughout the race. Both Da Costa, he was a bit further back, went to come over. He started 5th on the grid, didn't he? Vern started 4th, but Da Costa dropped back quite quickly. Vern stayed at the front. Then Da Costa came back through, had the contact when he tapped the back of Wehrlein. Wehrlein went for attack mode. Da Costa sort of came through and knocked off his nose cone as well. And all the drama of it being left at the side of turn 4 and 5 at the hairpin. But then Vern, definitely the strongest one for me all day, kept his head, kept his energy management, and did some fantastic overtaking. Again, teammates working together. It seems like this is a pattern we're seeing this year. Usually in motorsport, we say teammates are the worst enemies. In Formula E, they are your best friends. They truly are wingmen, and it truly is a Top Gun moment. I've been loving this. I can't think of a team where the two drivers are having a row with each other. They're all working in wonderful harmony. I mean, I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I think Formula E is the perfect basis to set it off with.
Indeed. And Ed, just to finish off the Mercedes, obviously minor blip this weekend, you could argue. Not at the front, not really challenging at the front. Bit of a disappointment in terms of Van Dorn and De Vries. They both made it into the duels, but they didn't really feature in the race. And if it wasn't for the sort of the cars that dropped out at the end, neither of them could have scored points.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And just briefly on Vern, 2 things. I thought he did extremely well considering he had food poisoning the whole day to get that 3rd place. Was pretty solid. But Vern always does well. Remember, he was caught what I think we later found out was COVID at Marrakesh in 2020, and he was able to get a podium that day as well. And just beat Maximilian Junfer to 2nd, if I remember correctly. Or was it 3rd? I can't remember. But he was definitely on the podium and won those positions. And I remember hearing on the radio, me and Josh were listening in at one point. The engineer told Vern, don't use the radio, which I thought was interesting. So they clearly heard that we were listening in and didn't want us to give information on this live stream that clearly everyone was watching and listening to on Joshua Burch Motorsport on his YouTube channel. So, but anyway, we have a YouTube channel too, in case you're interested. There's lots of Lego animations and stuff that I do. But anyway, the question was about Mercedes, wasn't it? And there was the interesting moment I thought was when Van Dorn actually decided to overtake De Vries quite early on in the race, actually. And it felt a little bit like De Vries was managing energy, and ended up with Degrassi had a little moment with him as well at the hairpin at turn 5. And it felt like De Vries was sort of on the back foot and really on the defensive. I felt some of his moves. Actually, there was one he did on Cassidy, I think, at turn 9, him and Da Costa. And Cassidy had a big battle, and I felt De Vries was a little bit marginal on that. It sort of felt like a little bit kind of desperate in places, but just about avoided contact, didn't quite squeeze Nick Cassidy into the wall. So well done on that. But and Van Dorn, I think, a little bit unlucky. Like his race unravelled really when Degrassi hit him at the Ferris Hall Stadium, which was missed on the broadcast, unfortunately. But Degrassi got a penalty for it, so it must have been pretty clumsy from Lucas, you'd imagine. So you'd have to say, I think Van Dorn could probably got a better result had that not happened, and De Vries sort of just about surviving to 6th. So it was sort of damage limitation for Mercedes, not quite as bad a weekend day as Jaguar had, but certainly Mercedes would have expected perhaps to dominate, and it didn't quite pan out that way for them, neither for them or for Ventura. Really only Mortara had like the cleanest run of all of those Mercedes-powered cars. So there's work to do, but certainly Mercedes, I don't think they'll be too put out by the day's work, because they at least got something out of it. And fastest lap as well for De Vries, so it certainly shows the car had pace. They just couldn't quite use it with the qualifying behind the Porsches.
Right, boys, we're out of time. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you both about this race, and we got a couple of weeks off technically now because it's a while away now, about just a month and a bit till Rome. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure. Let's do it all again in Rome.
yeah, I'm looking forward to the break. As you can see, I'm not in my usual surroundings, so I hope to be back back at home by the time we do it, rather than having this big light that constantly keeps blacking out on me and messing up with my camera. But hopefully the audio is fine. So, but anyway, good to talk to you again about Formula E.
Yeah.
Been a while for me.
It's the holiday season now. Half term around the country is actually really weird. Half term. So some people are not half term for some other people. So holiday seasons, get those holidays in, especially with all the COVID restrictions that have been lifted at the moment. But thank you so much for listening to the FEZ show. We've enjoyed it. We will see you soon for the Rome E-Prix. Goodbye.